The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow through the kitchen window, illuminating the familiar surroundings of Maria's home. The smell of sautéed garlic and onions filled the air as she bustled around her kitchen, humming a gentle tune. She was lost in her thoughts, contemplating the day's events and how grateful she was for her family. Her husband, Thomas, would soon return from work, and the children would be home from school, eager to share their stories. But as she chopped vegetables for the evening meal, her phone buzzed on the counter, pulling her from her reverie. Maria glanced at it, expecting a text from her sister or perhaps a reminder about a school event. Instead, her heart plummeted as she noticed an unknown number flashing on the screen. She hesitated, but curiosity picked up the phone to check the message. The screen illuminated her face with an unsettling glow, and her breath caught in her throat. There, in full color, was a photograph of Thomas and a woman she didn't recognize, both laughing together at a restaurant. Thomas's arm was draped casually around the woman's shoulders, and the sparkle in his eyes was unmistakable. It was a moment of intimacy, a scene that sent a tidal wave of betrayal crashing over Maria. As the image sank in, her mind raced. Who was this woman? Why had Thomas never mentioned her? Maria could feel her heart pounding in her chest, a mixture of disbelief and devastation swirling within her. She had always trusted Thomas, believing he was a devoted husband and father. They had built a life together, one filled with love, laughter, and dreams for the future. But now, with a single photograph, that life felt like it was crumbling before her eyes. Maria, the sound of Thomas's voice pulled her from her thoughts. She quickly locked her phone and placed it on the counter, forcing a smile as he walked into the kitchen, his briefcase in hand. "What's for dinner?" he asked, oblivious to the storm brewing inside her. "Just the usual," she replied, her voice steady despite the chaos in her heart. "Pasta with garlic bread." "Sounds great." Thomas grinned, leaning down to kiss her cheek. Maria felt a pang of guilt mixed with her anguish. How could she continue to act as if everything was fine when her world had just been turned upside down? As they sat down for dinner, Maria struggled to keep the conversation light. The children chattered about their day, blissfully unaware of the turmoil their mother was experiencing. But every laugh, every smile from Thomas felt like a dagger in her heart. The image of him with another woman haunted her thoughts, replaying in her mind like a broken record. That night, Maria lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. She replayed every moment of their life together, questioning every loving word he had ever spoken to her. Had it all been a lie? The laughter they shared, the plans they made, were they all just a facade masking his betrayal? The weight of her thoughts pressed down on her, suffocating her as she struggled to make sense of the chaos. Days passed, and the tension in the household grew palpable. Maria's heart felt heavy as she moved through her daily routine, her children's laughter echoing in stark contrast to the storm raging within her. She found herself withdrawing, her mind racing with thoughts of betrayal and revenge. Could she confront Thomas? What would she say? Each time she considered talking to him, her resolve faltered. She couldn't bear the thought of shattering her children's world, or the pain of hearing him deny everything. Instead, Maria became a silent observer, piecing together the puzzle of Thomas's infidelity. She began to notice the little things. The way he was often distracted when he was home, the late nights at work that seemed to stretch into hours. Each passing day felt like a countdown, a race against time as she sought the proof she needed. Her heart ached with each revelation, and the tension in her chest tightened like a vice. One evening, after the children had gone to bed, Maria decided to take matters into her own hands. She couldn't continue living in this limbo. She needed answers. With a steadying breath, she grabbed her coat and slipped out into the night, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. She drove to the restaurant where the photograph had been taken, her mind racing with possibilities. As she approached the establishment, Maria's heart raced. The parking lot was nearly empty as she parked her car, her hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel. She took a moment to gather her thoughts, knowing that this was a crucial step in uncovering the truth. With each step toward the entrance, the weight of her mission pressed heavily on her shoulders. Inside, the ambience was warm and inviting, with soft music playing in the background. Maria scanned the room, her heart sinking as she spotted Thomas sitting at a table with the same woman from the photograph. They were engrossed in conversation, their laughter ringing out like a cruel reminder of her own heartbreak. Maria felt her pulse quicken as she took a seat at the far end of the room, hidden in the shadows. Every word they exchanged felt like a dagger to her heart. She could see the way Thomas leaned in, his eyes sparkling with affection as he spoke to Jennifer. It felt surreal, watching the man she loved share a moment with another woman, and the bitter taste of betrayal consumed her. As she watched, a dark realization began to take root in her mind. If he was capable of this, what else was he capable of? Maria's breathing quickened as she fought against the rising tide of emotions. Anger, sadness, and a yearning for revenge collided within her, creating a tempest of feelings she struggled to contain. She couldn't confront him yet. She needed more proof, something undeniable that would force him to face the truth. Over the following days, Maria's life became a series of covert operations. She began tailing Thomas, her heart racing with every encounter she witnessed between him and Jennifer. Each time they laughed together or shared a secret glance, her resolve hardened. She felt like a different person, driven by a dark force that pushed her further down a path she never thought she would tread. As the days turned into weeks, Maria's emotions spiraled out of control. The pain of betrayal morphed into resentment, and the imagined scenarios of revenge danced in her mind like a haunting melody. She began to research the depths of her anger, seeking a way to make him pay for the pain he had caused her. The idea of confronting him seemed less appealing with each passing day. Instead, she craved a sense of power, a way to reclaim her shattered world. In the quiet of the night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Maria felt a surge of determination. If Thomas wouldn't confess, she would gather proof, something that would shatter the illusion of their life together and expose the truth. With every heartbeat, she felt the fire of her resolve burning brighter, ready to ignite the darkness that was growing within her. Little did she know, this journey would soon lead her to a point of no return. As Maria stood silently behind the tree, her heart raced with a mixture of heartbreak and fury. The soft rustle of leaves seemed to amplify the laughter that escaped from her husband's lips, laughter she had believed was reserved for her and their family. But there he was, arms wrapped around Jennifer, his younger co-worker, their intimacy laid bare in the dappled sunlight of the secluded park. The sight felt like a dagger twisting in her chest, her breath hitching as she fought back tears. She had come to this park many times with Thomas, sharing dreams and secrets, yet now it felt like a graveyard of their love. She could hardly bear to watch, but she couldn't tear her eyes away. "Can you believe how beautiful this place is?" Jennifer's voice rang out, light and carefree. "Only because you're here," Thomas replied, his tone dripping with affection that Maria hadn't heard in months. With every word exchanged between them, Maria's heart sank deeper into despair. She felt invisible, a ghost haunting the edges of their happiness. She turned away, the weight of her emotions almost too heavy to bear. As she stumbled back to her car, her mind raced with thoughts of betrayal, revenge, and the bitter knowledge that her life was unraveling. The drive home was a blur. Once inside the familiar walls of her home, the warmth that once comforted her now felt suffocating. She paced the kitchen, her mind a whirlwind of emotions, replaying the scene at the park like a broken record. How could he do this to her? To their children? The thought of their innocent faces, blissfully unaware of the turmoil brewing beneath the surface, made her heart ache even more. That night, as she lay in bed beside Thomas, who was blissfully unaware of her turmoil, sleep eluded her. She stared at the ceiling, consumed by thoughts of revenge. She didn't want to be just a victim of his betrayal. She wanted him to feel the pain that had ripped through her heart. The darkness that enveloped her heart began to take root, and she found herself spiraling into a dangerous mindset. Desperation clawed at her, and in her anguish, she turned to the one place she knew would provide her with answers: the dark web. It felt wrong, illicit, but the more she read, the more empowered she felt. Her fingers trembled as she explored forums discussing poisons, each word a siren call to her twisted sense of justice. She stumbled upon a thread detailing a tasteless, odorless substance that could mimic the symptoms of a natural death. Her heart raced with a mix of fear and exhilaration as she read. The idea of executing a plan so sinister thrilled her in a way that both terrified and excited her. She could feel the power surging through her veins as she made the decision to order the poison. It was a cold, calculated choice, but in that moment, it felt like the only way to reclaim her life. The package arrived discreetly, and Maria felt a rush of adrenaline as she held it in her hands. It was a lifeline to the revenge she so desperately sought. Yet, as she stared at the small vial, doubt began to creep in. Could she really go through with it? She thought back to the times Thomas had held her close, the laughter they had shared, the life they had built together. But each memory was tainted now, overshadowed by the betrayal that gnawed at her insides. That evening, she watched Thomas and Jennifer together in her mind's eye, their laughter ringing like a bell in the quiet of her home. The betrayal felt like a knife, carving deeper into her heart with every passing moment. She needed to act, needed to make him feel the anguish that had consumed her. With grim determination, she decided to prepare a special dinner for Thomas, a night he would remember forever. The aroma of roasted chicken filled the air as she set the table, her heart racing with anticipation. She poured a glass of wine, the rich red liquid swirling like her emotions inside. As she plated the food, she could almost hear Thomas's compliments echoing in her ears. "You always know how to make my favorite," he would say, blissfully unaware of the darkness lurking beneath the surface. When Thomas arrived home, he was greeted by the enticing smells wafting through the house. "Wow, Maria, this looks amazing," he exclaimed, his eyes lighting up with joy. "Just wanted to do something special for you," she replied, forcing a smile, her heart pounding in her chest. They sat down to eat, and Maria's stomach twisted with anxiety. Each bite Thomas took felt like a countdown to the inevitable. "You've outdone yourself," he said, savoring the flavors as he took another forkful. Maria felt a rush of satisfaction, a twisted pleasure in knowing that soon everything would change. As the evening wore on, they engaged in light conversation, the kind that felt normal yet surreal to Maria. She felt an overwhelming urge to confess, to tell him everything, but the moment was fleeting. She couldn't risk ruining her plan. Instead, she laughed at his jokes, her insides churning with anticipation. Days passed, and Thomas began to feel unwell. He brushed it off as a stomach bug, but Maria knew the truth. Each cough, each grimace of discomfort sent her heart racing with exhilaration. She played the part of the concerned wife, feigning sympathy while secretly relishing his suffering. The thrill of her secret consumed her, blurring the lines between right and wrong. Meanwhile, Jennifer sensed something was amiss. Concerned for Thomas's health, she reached out to him, urging him to see a doctor. Maria learned of their conversations and felt a pang of jealousy mixed with exhilaration. The realization that Jennifer was still in the picture only fueled her desire for revenge. Maria was determined that Jennifer would not escape her wrath, and her mind raced with thoughts of how to ensure that both of them would pay for their betrayal. Every moment spent with Thomas felt like a facade, a mask she wore to hide her true intentions. The thrill of the impending revenge pulsed through her veins, drowning out the remnants of love she once held for him. Maria was no longer just a scorned wife. She was a woman on a mission, and nothing would stand in her way. Each night, as she lay beside Thomas, she felt the weight of her decisions pressing down on her. The poison was her secret, a dark companion that whispered promises of retribution. But as the days turned to weeks, the reality of her actions began to settle in. This was not just about revenge. It was about losing herself in the process. Yet, with every passing moment, her resolve only grew stronger. She was determined to follow through with her plan, to make him feel the pain she had endured. As she prepared for the final act, she could almost taste the sweet satisfaction of her revenge, the thought of it pulling her deeper into the abyss. Maria was ready to unleash the darkness that had taken root in her heart, and nothing would stop her now. Maria stood at the dining table, the flickering candlelight casting soft shadows across the room, illuminating the meticulously arranged plates and silverware. She had spent the afternoon preparing an exquisite meal, pouring her heart into every dish, all the while pretending to be the loving wife Thomas had always known. As she placed the last serving onto his plate, she felt a rush of adrenaline course through her veins. This dinner was not just a meal. It was a carefully orchestrated act of revenge. Thomas entered the dining room, a casual smile on his face. "Wow, it smells amazing in here. You really outdid yourself, Maria," he said, pulling out a chair and sitting down, completely unaware of the storm brewing beneath Maria's composed exterior. "Thank you, Thomas. I wanted to do something special for us tonight," she replied, her voice steady, though her heart raced. She poured 2 glasses of wine, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the bottle. The rich red liquid sloshed gently as she filled the glasses, and she couldn't help but notice the way Thomas's eyes lit up, his attention solely on her. "Just like old times, huh?" he said, raising his glass in a toast. "To us." "To us," Maria echoed, clinking her glass against his, suppressing the urge to grimace. As Thomas took his first hearty bite of the meal, she forced a smile, masking the whirlwind of emotions raging inside her. Every bite he took was a step closer to the dark end she had planned for them. "This is incredible, Maria. You really have a talent for cooking," he complimented, savoring another forkful of food. Maria felt a surge of satisfaction mixed with guilt. The intricacies of her plan weighed heavily on her conscience, but the image of Thomas wrapped around Jennifer, laughing and sharing secrets, fueled her resolve. "Thank you, I enjoy it," she replied, her voice even. "How was work today?" she asked, trying to keep the conversation light, but inside, her thoughts were spiraling. She wanted to know if he had seen Jennifer, if their affair had continued. "Oh, the usual, busy, but it's all good," he said, waving his hand dismissively. Maria's heart sank. She couldn't bear the thought of him being so nonchalant about the woman who had stolen his affection. As the evening wore on, Maria maintained a facade of normalcy, engaging in small talk, laughing at Thomas's jokes, all while her mind raced with thoughts of betrayal. She could barely focus on his words, her attention drifting to the poison that was slowly working its way into his system. Each cough he emitted sent a jolt of fear through her, and yet a dark thrill accompanied it, a twisted satisfaction at the thought of retribution. Days passed, and with each passing moment, Thomas's health began to decline. He dismissed it as a stomach bug, but Maria knew better. Each time he coughed or grimaced in pain, she felt her heart race with a mix of concern and exhilaration. She played the part of the dutiful wife, feigning worry and concern, but deep down, she relished in his discomfort. The thrill of her secret consumed her, blurring the lines between right and wrong. One afternoon, as Maria was cleaning up after lunch, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was Jennifer, reaching out to Thomas with concern about his health. Watching this unfold, Maria felt a strange mix of jealousy and exhilaration. The realization that Jennifer still cared, still had a hold over Thomas, pushed her deeper into her dark plans. "Hey, are you okay? You've seemed off lately. Maybe you should see a doctor." Jennifer's message read, and Maria's heart sank. How dare she? The woman who had intruded upon her life was still lurking, still trying to play the role of caretaker. Thomas replied dismissively, telling her it was just a passing bug. Maria clenched her jaw at the thought, her fingers trembling as she typed a reply to her own message. "You should really take care of yourself, Thomas," she wrote, feigning concern even as anger simmered beneath the surface. "Of course," Thomas replied, oblivious to the turmoil raging in her heart. "I'll be fine. I just need some rest." But Maria knew he wouldn't be fine. The poison was working its way through him, and she couldn't help but feel that the end was drawing near. The thrill of her secret was intoxicating, and she felt empowered by the control she had over their lives. One evening, while preparing dinner, Maria overheard Thomas on the phone with Jennifer. He was laughing, his voice light, and she felt bile rise in her throat. "Yeah, I just need to get through this bug, and I'll be back to normal," Thomas said, chuckling. "You're too sweet to worry about me. Just focus on work. I'll be fine." Maria's heart raced as she gripped the countertop, feeling the weight of her emotions crashing down on her. She felt the urge to scream, to confront him, to shatter this illusion of happiness he had with Jennifer. But instead, she took a deep breath and forced herself to remain calm. As the days turned into weeks, the tension in their home became palpable. Maria wore her mask of normalcy with precision, but inside, she was unraveling. She watched as Thomas grew weaker, often spending hours lying on the couch, clutching his stomach in pain. Yet, he remained oblivious to the truth, convinced it was merely a passing illness. "Why don't you go see a doctor?" Maria suggested one evening, her voice laced with false concern. "It might help to get a professional opinion." "I'll be fine, Maria," Thomas said, his tone dismissive. "It's just a bug. I'll shake it off." The frustration within her boiled over, but she masked it with a smile. "Okay, but I worry about you. You're my husband. I want you to be healthy." "Thanks, babe," he replied, a warm smile spreading across his face. Maria felt a pang of guilt at the sight. Despite everything, she still loved him, but the betrayal weighed heavily on her heart. She wanted to scream, to make him see the truth, but the poison had already taken root, and she was too deep into her plan to turn back now. As the days passed, Maria felt an intense pressure building within her. The thrill of revenge had become an obsession, clouding her judgment and consuming her thoughts. She lived for the moments when Thomas would wince in pain, her heart racing at the realization that her plan was unfolding perfectly. But she also felt a growing unease, a nagging voice in the back of her mind questioning whether this was truly what she wanted. The line between love and hate had blurred, and Maria found herself teetering on the edge of a precipice, unsure of where she would land. Yet every time she thought of Thomas and Jennifer together, every time she recalled the laughter they shared, she felt the fire of vengeance reignite within her. The thrill of it all was intoxicating, and she was determined to see it through to the end. On one particularly stormy evening, as thunder rumbled in the distance, Maria sat alone in the living room, staring out the window. The rain poured down in sheets, mirroring the turmoil within her. She knew she was playing a dangerous game, but she felt as though she had no choice. The betrayal had shattered her world, and now, revenge was the only thing keeping her afloat. Just as she was lost in thought, her phone buzzed again, jolting her from her reverie. It was a message from Jennifer, asking about Thomas's health. A wave of anger washed over her, and she felt her grip tightening on the phone. "Why do you care?" she whispered to herself, the words laced with bitterness. Taking a deep breath, Maria composed herself and typed a response. "He's getting better, I think. Just needs some rest." The response was almost immediate. "I really think he should see a doctor. This has gone on long enough." Maria's heart raced. The audacity of this woman was infuriating. "I'll take care of him," she replied tersely, the words dripping with venom. As she set her phone down, she glanced at the kitchen, where the remnants of her dark plan lay hidden away. She felt a surge of power and fear, knowing that the end was drawing near and that she was the one pulling the strings. The storm outside raged on, but within her, a different kind of storm brewed, a tempest of revenge that threatened to consume everything in its path. Maria closed her eyes, her heart pounding with anticipation. The final act of her plan was approaching, and she could hardly contain the exhilaration coursing through her veins. The price of betrayal would soon be paid, and she was ready to face whatever consequences awaited her. The tension in the hospital room was palpable as Maria stepped inside, her heart racing with a mix of anger and anxiety. Thomas lay in the hospital bed, his face pale and drawn, while Jennifer sat beside him, her fingers intertwined with his. The sight of them together ignited a fierce rage within Maria, a visceral reaction that coursed through her veins. She felt like an intruder in a world that had once felt familiar, but now seemed alien and hostile. Maria... Thomas's voice broke through her thoughts, a weak but familiar sound. He looked up, his eyes filled with concern. "What are you doing here?" Maria forced a smile, masking the turmoil brewing inside her. "I got the call. I was so worried about you." She stepped closer, her eyes darting between Thomas and Jennifer. The sight of Jennifer's concerned expression deepened Maria's resentment. How dare she act like she played any part in Thomas's care? "Thank you for being here, Jennifer," Maria said, injecting a strange sweetness into her voice. "I appreciate it." Jennifer looked up, her expression softening. "I just want to make sure he's okay," she replied, her voice laced with genuine concern. "He really scared me." Maria's jaw tightened. "Well, I'm here now," she said, her tone clipped. "I'll take it from here." Thomas, oblivious to the undercurrents of hostility, turned his attention to Maria. "I'm feeling a bit better. They said it was probably just a bad reaction to something I ate," he explained, his voice shaky but relieved. Maria nodded, forcing herself to appear supportive. "That's good to hear," she said, but inside, a storm raged. She had to act, and soon. The sight of them together only fueled her determination to enact her revenge. As the hours passed, Maria found herself pacing in the hospital corridor, her mind racing. She felt like a coiled spring, ready to snap. The thought of Jennifer's smugness, as if she had some claim over Thomas, made her blood boil. She had to confront Jennifer. There was no other way to regain control of her life and the situation. Later that evening, after Thomas had been discharged, Maria invited Jennifer over for coffee. It was a calculated move, designed to disguise her true intentions. Just a friendly get-together, she told herself, even as her heart raced with anticipation of what was to come. When Jennifer arrived, Maria greeted her with a smile that barely masked her resentment. "Thanks for coming," she said, ushering Jennifer into the living room. The dim lighting cast shadows on the walls, creating an atmosphere thick with tension. "Of course. I thought it would be nice to catch up," Jennifer replied, oblivious to the storm brewing inside Maria. They settled into the plush couch, and Maria offered her a cup of coffee, carefully lacing one of the cups with the poison that had arrived just days earlier. As they sat across from each other, Maria forced herself to engage in light conversation. "How's work going?" she asked, her voice dripping with feigned interest. "Oh, you know the usual," Jennifer said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "It's been busy, but I'm managing." She smiled, and for a moment it felt almost normal, as if they were just two friends catching up. Maria nodded, her heart racing as she watched Jennifer sip her coffee. "I've been thinking a lot about family lately," she said, her voice steady. "You know, how important it is to have a strong support system." Jennifer smiled again, a little too brightly. "Absolutely. Family is everything. I really admire how dedicated you are to yours." The compliment felt like a knife twisting in Maria's gut. The irony of Jennifer's words was not lost on her. This woman had invaded her life, her marriage, and now she was sitting here, blithely unaware of the darkness that lurked beneath Maria's facade. "I've been working hard to keep our family together," Maria said, her voice low. "Sometimes it feels like I'm the only one trying." Jennifer's expression faltered for just a moment before she masked it with concern. "I'm sure Thomas appreciates everything you do for him," she said softly. Maria's smile tightened, and she felt a surge of fury. "You have no idea," she replied, her tone icy. "But I'm sure you think you know him well enough." Their gazes locked, and for a moment, the air crackled with unspoken tension. Maria felt the thrill of power wash over her as she excused herself to the kitchen, her heart pounding in her chest. In the kitchen, she retrieved the vial of poison, her hands trembling slightly. She could hear Jennifer's soft laughter from the living room, and it only fueled her resolve. This was it. This was the moment she would reclaim her life. Taking a deep breath, Maria returned to the living room, the vial hidden behind her back. She poured another cup of coffee, deliberately lacing it with the deadly substance, her heart racing as she prepared to hand it to Jennifer. "Here you go. Just a little something special," she said sweetly, her voice steady as she approached Jennifer. Jennifer took the cup, her eyes sparkling with gratitude. "Thanks, Maria. You always make the best coffee," she said, taking a sip. Maria felt a rush of satisfaction, but it was quickly overshadowed by anxiety. What if Thomas walked in? The thought sent a jolt of panic through her. She needed to stay calm. She needed to see this through. Just as she was about to take a seat across from Jennifer, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was Thomas. "Where are you?" he texted. The message sent a wave of panic crashing over her, and she felt her stomach churn. "Damn it," she muttered under her breath, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She had to act quickly, but fear gripped her. She didn't want to give Jennifer any chance to escape her fate. "Everything okay?" Jennifer asked, looking up with a hint of concern. Maria forced a smile, her mind racing. "Yes, just a little distracted," she lied, her heart pounding in her chest. "You know how it is." As she navigated the precarious balance of her emotions, she felt the walls closing in around her. She had meticulously planned every detail, but now, uncertainty clawed at her resolve. Would she really go through with it? "Are you sure you're all right?" Jennifer pressed, her eyes searching Maria's face for answers. Maria's heart raced, and she felt a momentary flicker of doubt. But the image of Thomas and Jennifer together, their laughter echoing in her mind, solidified her determination. "I'm fine," she said, her voice firm. "I just want to make sure you enjoy your coffee." With a practiced smile, she handed the cup to Jennifer, her hands steady. But as she did, a wave of guilt washed over her. What had she become? In that moment, she realized she was teetering on the edge of a precipice, and there was no going back. The darkness within her had taken hold, and she was on the verge of losing everything: her sanity, her marriage, her very soul. As she watched Jennifer take another sip, the weight of her decision bore down on her. The thrill of revenge was intoxicating, but the reality of her actions threatened to unravel everything she had ever known. Maria fought to maintain her composure as she handed the coffee cup to Jennifer, her heart racing beneath the surface of her calm facade. "Just a little something special," she said, forcing a smile that felt like a mask slipping over her true emotions. Jennifer, blissfully unaware of the deadly secret contained within the fragrant brew, took the cup with a bright smile, her eyes sparkling with warmth. Maria felt a rush of satisfaction, but it was fraught with anxiety. What if Thomas walked in and saw this moment? What if he saw the glint of malice in her eyes? They settled back into their conversation, the air thick with tension. Maria studied Jennifer, her heart pounding with both exhilaration and dread. The younger woman animatedly shared stories about her day at work, her voice a melodic lilt that contrasted sharply with the sinister intentions swirling in Maria's mind. "I really admire how you handle those big projects," Jennifer said, her tone genuine. "You always have such great ideas." "Thanks, Jennifer," Maria replied, her smile tight. "I've just been really inspired lately." The irony of her words wasn't lost on her. Inspiration from a darker place, one that was consuming her from the inside out. As they chatted, Maria's thoughts spiraled. Would the poison take effect quickly? Should she leave the room to give it a moment? Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her own cup, the bitter taste of coffee barely registering against her racing heartbeat. Just as she was about to suggest they move to the living room, a sudden fit of coughing erupted from Jennifer, shattering the delicate veneer of the evening. "Are you okay?" Maria asked, panic seeping into her voice as she rushed to Jennifer's side. The younger woman's face turned a shade of crimson, her eyes wide with alarm. I don't know what's happening," she gasped, clutching her throat as she struggled for breath. The panic rising in Maria mirrored the chaos unfolding before her. Jennifer. Just then, Thomas's voice echoed from the hallway. Maria, where are you? The sound sent a shiver down Maria's spine, and she felt the walls of her carefully constructed plan begin to crumble. Her heart raced as she processed the imminent danger. If he walked in now, everything she had orchestrated would unravel in an instant. Stay calm, Jennifer. Just breathe, Maria said, her voice deceptively soothing, though inside, she was a tempest of fear and guilt. She glanced toward the hallway, her mind racing with possibilities. I'll get you some water, she added, desperate to buy herself a moment to think. Don't leave me, Jennifer gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. Desperation etched into her features. Panic surged in Maria's chest as she hesitated, torn between her instinct to flee and the facade she had to maintain. I'll be right back, Maria assured her, her voice steadier than she felt. She turned sharply, her mind racing with thoughts of how to navigate this treacherous situation. In the back of her mind, she heard Thomas's footsteps drawing nearer, and she could almost feel the ground shifting beneath her feet. Maria dashed into the kitchen, the cold tiles grounding her momentarily as she splashed water into a glass. Her hands shook slightly, and she forced herself to take a deep breath, trying to quell the rising tide of panic. What if it was too late? What if Thomas caught her red-handed? As she filled the glass, she could hear Jennifer's labored breaths echoing through the house, each gasp a reminder of the perilous game she was playing. Maria, what's going on? Thomas's voice boomed from the living room, laced with concern. The sound sent a fresh wave of dread crashing over her. She had to think fast. Just a second, she called back, her voice strained as she tried to sound casual. She poured another glass of water, her mind racing with the realization that she was in over her head. Grabbing the glass, she took a moment to compose herself before stepping back into the living room, her heart pounding in her ears. As she entered, the sight that greeted her stopped her cold. Jennifer was on her knees, gasping for air, her face pale and drenched in sweat. Thomas was kneeling beside her, his expression a mix of confusion and alarm. What happened? He demanded, his eyes darting between Maria and Jennifer, as if searching for answers. Jennifer, Maria exclaimed, rushing to her side, feigning concern as she knelt next to Thomas. What's wrong? What can I do? She handed Jennifer the glass of water, her heart racing as she tried to appear genuinely worried. Help me, Jennifer croaked, her hands trembling as she reached for the glass. I can't breathe. Just sip slowly. You'll be okay, Maria urged, her voice dripping with false sympathy. She watched as Jennifer took a tentative sip, her face contorting in discomfort. Panic settled in the pit of Maria's stomach, and she fought the urge to bolt from the room. Maria, what is happening? Thomas's voice cut through the chaos, his gaze piercing and accusatory. What did you do? Nothing. I swear, Maria protested, her voice rising in pitch. I didn't do anything. I was just making coffee. She shot a glance at Jennifer, whose eyes were wide with fear and realization. Maria's heart thudded in her chest as she sensed the shifting tides of suspicion. Maybe I'm having an allergic reaction, Jennifer gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. The words hung heavily in the air, filling the space with dread. Maria's mind raced as she tried to calculate how to salvage the situation. An allergic reaction? Thomas echoed, his brow furrowed in concern. Why didn't you tell me you had allergies? We need to get you to the hospital. I didn't know. Jennifer cried, her voice breaking. I swear I didn't know. Maria's heart raced as she watched Thomas rush to grab his phone, his attention fully diverted from her. In that moment, she felt a wave of panic wash over her. She had orchestrated this entire evening, and now it was spiraling out of her control. The poison she had so meticulously planned to use was now an undeniable mark against her, and the weight of her choices pressed down on her like a heavy shroud. Just breathe, Jennifer. Stay with us, Maria urged, her voice trembling slightly as she tried to maintain the illusion of a concerned wife. But inside, She was unraveling, the reality of her actions crashing down around her like a tidal wave. What had started as a calculated plan for revenge was now a chaotic scene that threatened to expose the depths of her betrayal. As Thomas dialed for help, Maria's mind raced with the consequences of the moment. She was trapped in a web of her own making, and the poison she had chosen as her weapon now felt more like a noose tightening around her own neck. The darkness of her intentions loomed larger than ever, and in that harrowing moment, she realized that the price of revenge might just be her own soul. As Jennifer gasped for air, a wave of panic washed over Maria. Thomas, who had rushed to Jennifer's side, looked back at Maria with confusion etched on his face. "What's happening?" he shouted, his voice tinged with desperation. Maria felt as though the walls were closing in around her, the very air thickening with the weight of her actions. She stood frozen, a mere spectator to the chaos she had orchestrated, her heart pounding in her chest as guilt clawed at her insides. "Thomas, I don't know," Maria managed to stammer, her voice barely above a whisper. She felt her stomach twist at the sight of Jennifer struggling, her face turning an ashen hue. Each gasp was a reminder of the irreversible steps she had taken, and the reality of her revenge began to sink in. She remembered the nights of plotting, the thrill of planning, and now it was all unraveling like a tightly knit thread. "Stay with me, Jennifer. Please." Thomas's voice broke through Maria's thoughts as he cradled Jennifer's head in his arms. He was panicking, his eyes darting between Maria and the woman he had betrayed his wife for. "What did you do to her, Maria? What is wrong with her?" His voice was a mix of fear and accusation, and Maria felt the heat of his gaze piercing through her. In that moment, Jennifer suddenly turned her gaze towards Maria, her eyes wide with terror and realization. "You did this, didn't you?" she croaked, her voice raspy and strained. The accusation hung heavily in the air, a noose tightening around Maria's neck. Panic surged through her, and she could feel the color draining from her face. The truth, once buried deep within her, was clawing its way to the surface, threatening to engulf her. "No, I would never," Maria shouted, but the conviction in her voice faltered. She could see the doubt in Thomas's eyes, the flicker of suspicion igniting as he processed Jennifer's words. The moment felt surreal, as if it were a scene from a twisted play, and she was trapped in a role she could no longer control. "Maria, what the hell is going on?" Thomas's voice rose in a mixture of confusion and fury. "Is this some kind of sick joke? Why isn't she breathing right?" The chaos around them swirled like a tempest, drowning out any coherent thought. All Maria could do was watch, her heart racing as the paramedics' sirens wailed in the distance, drawing closer with each passing second. As the emergency team burst through the door, Maria's mind raced. She felt a desperate urge to confess, to unburden herself of the weight of her actions. The paramedics rushed to Jennifer's side, working quickly to assess the situation. "What happened?" one of them shouted, looking at Thomas, who was still cradling Jennifer's head. She was fine, and then she just started choking," Thomas exclaimed, panic evident in his voice. He looked over at Maria, eyes blazing with a mix of fear and anger. "What did you do?" The accusation in his tone cut deeper than any knife, and Maria felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. In the midst of the chaos, another paramedic looked at Maria, his expression unreadable. "Ma'am, we need to know if she's taken anything unusual. Did she eat or drink anything out of the ordinary?" The question felt like a spotlight, shining directly on her, illuminating the darkness of her soul. I don't know," Maria stammered, her voice shaky. She could feel the weight of the poison vial in her pocket, a cruel reminder of the choice she had made. It felt like a lead weight dragging her down into the depths of her own despair. "I made coffee earlier. Maybe it was that." The paramedics exchanged glances, their expressions serious, as they began working on Jennifer, who was now lying on the floor, her body convulsing. "We need to get her to the hospital. Now!" one of them shouted, and they quickly maneuvered her onto a stretcher. Maria felt as if she were watching a scene unfold in slow motion. As they wheeled Jennifer out, Thomas turned to Maria, his expression a mix of horror and disbelief. "You need to tell me the truth, Maria. What happened? What did you do?" His voice was low, but the intensity of his gaze felt like a burning brand, marking her as a villain in this tragic tale. In that moment of desperation, something inside Maria shattered. The facade she had maintained began to crumble, and the weight of her guilt surged to the surface. She started, her voice trembling with emotion. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I found out about you and her, and I just wanted to make you feel what I felt." The confession tumbled out, raw and unfiltered, as if a dam had burst within her. "What are you saying?" Thomas's voice was tight, the disbelief palpable. "You poisoned her?" His eyes widened in shock, and the betrayal hung heavily between them, thickening the air like smoke. I didn't think it would go this far," Maria cried, her voice breaking as tears streamed down her face. "I just wanted you to understand the pain you caused me." The fervor in her words echoed in the silent room, reverberating through the very fabric of their shattered lives. As the paramedics loaded Jennifer into the ambulance, Maria felt an overwhelming sense of loss. She had lost Thomas, lost her dignity, and now she was on the brink of losing everything she held dear. "Thomas, please," she began, but he cut her off, shaking his head in disbelief. "I can't believe you would do this," he whispered, the hurt in his voice cutting deeper than any physical pain. "You've lost yourself, Maria. This isn't the woman I married." With that, he turned away, his expression one of utter despair as he followed the paramedics out the door. As the sound of the ambulance faded into the distance, Maria felt an emptiness envelop her, a void that consumed every ounce of hope she once held. She was left standing alone in the dimly lit hallway, surrounded by the remnants of her shattered life. The thrill of revenge that once fueled her now felt like a poison coursing through her veins, tainting her very soul. In that moment of solitude, Maria realized the true cost of her actions. The desire for revenge had blinded her to the love that still flickered within her, a love that was now extinguished by betrayal and despair. She had forged a path of destruction, and in doing so, she had lost not only Thomas but herself in the process. The weight of her choices pressed down on her like an anchor, dragging her into the depths of her own darkness. As the echoes of sirens faded, Maria knew that the road ahead would be fraught with pain and regret. She had crossed a line from which there was no return, and the haunting realization settled in. Revenge had not brought her peace. It had only sealed her fate as the architect of her own demise.